In some instances, they'd go into a particular town and it would be a white dance on Friday night and the black dance Saturday night. And there's one story in the book where the black dance had been one night, and the next night, when the white patrons came, they broke all of the glasses in the bar because they didn't want to drink out of the same glasses that black people had drunk out of.
Hey everybody, this is Jimmy. Welcome back to another episode of the Jimmy Tingle Show. We have a very special guest this week. Yes, we do. I know I say that every week, but it's true. All of our guests are very special. This young lady, Carmen Fields, has been a fixture in the greater Boston journalism community for over 30 years. Her experience includes both print and broadcast journalism, journalism education, and both corporate and nonprofit media relations. Her 1993 documentary, Goin Back to T-Town, recently re-aired on PBS. The show is about the Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the historic 1921 race massacre, which destroyed Black Wallstreet. Her new book is Goin Back to T-Town, about her father Ernie Fields' journey as a jazz man in the 1920s across the entire country, including the Deep South, and it is just being released and is coming up to a bookstore near you. And we'll get to that in the show notes and during our conversation. Please welcome to the show my buddy, the one and only Carmen Fields. Hello, Carmen. How are you?
Hey there, Jimmy. I am great, and I'm so honored to be in your company for this special conversation.
Well, cool. Thanks so much for joining us, Carmen. So tell us, first off, tell us about how did you get involved with creating a documentary about the Tulsa race riots of the 1920s, and why is it being re-aired now? It came out in 1993 originally, but it was just re-aired on public television.
It was a part of the series called The American Experience, which is a very popular PBS series. When it was initially commissioned, the executive producer wanted a look at the interior of segregation, but she didn't want to go to the Deep South or Atlanta or the place in Mississippi, the places you always think of when you think of segregation or rigid segregation. And Tulsa, Oklahoma became the typical place to look at. Well, I was assigned and given a fabulous crew that included Sam Pollard, who's a very well-respected documentarian, and his partner, Joyce Vaughn, and we started researching. Well, the interior segregation is one thing, but in Tulsa, you couldn't look at it without taking into account that in 1921, the black side of town was literally destroyed by racist marauders across that. And little did we know that very little had been done to tell of that time and that tragedy. So we put the program together. It aired in 1993. And in 2021, which marked the 100th anniversary of the massacre, PBS, in their wisdom, decided to re-air the documentary because across the nation, there was all of this interest in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I mean, CBS and ABC and New York Times and Wall Street Journal. What happened in Tulsa, 1921? Well, I was delighted to know that they were re-airing it this year because May 31st is when the massacre occurred. And so all during the week of May 31st, they saw fit to air it on different platforms again. And I'm deeply, deeply honored. And the race massacre was told in the words of people who had actually experienced it, and also the interior of segregation was expressed by those who had lived it after the massacre and when Tulsa, the black side of town, Greenwood district, was rebuilt. So it was an all-encompassing look at how we lived, the way we were.
Mm-hmm. So your relationship with Tulsa is that you grew up there. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's where I was born and raised, and was a product of the segregation of the day. I graduate of Ralph J. Bunch Elementary School, Marion Anderson Junior High School, and Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay. And all those schools were segregated at the time.
That's correct. That
Is this
was
in the 60s, the 50s?
That's how you knew. Yes, that's the 50s and 60s. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so it's quite a statement that you made a film in the early 1990s that has the staying power to be released 30 years later. Mm-hmm. It certainly wasn't on everybody's radar until recently, correct?
Until very recently, and I'd like to say in part thanks to the 1993 film, the city fathers began re-examining what had happened. There had been gossip that there were mass graves of Black bodies in a cemetery, and the mayor decided to have a team of archaeologists search the burial ground, and they have found some remains. And as we speak, DNA processing is underway. There has been a movement. There are still about 3 or 4 survivors who are in their 100ths. One is 100 and I just celebrated her 109th birthday. Another gentleman is 107. And there's a movement for some reparations for them as survivors, and also for the community as a whole. What form that will take is still under discussion. Are we talking about scholarships? Are we talking about home loans, or how? Because the word reparations is a very loaded word nowadays. Right. But that documentary started the ball to rolling on wanting to know more, learn more, and teach.
That's really a fascinating story, Carmen. Tell me, growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as a kid or as a teenager, did you hear anything about this riot, this massacre in 1921? Was that something that was of folklore, or did you know anybody there?
It was almost like a myth. If it was mentioned, it was whispered very surreptitiously. It was not something that was out in the open, and I'm not sure why that was, whether there was fear of repercussions, but no, it was not in our textbooks that we had at the time, and very little, very seldom. In fact, it was mentioned so little, it wasn't a part of my consciousness until we began to work on the documentary. And thankfully, my parents, who had been in Oklahoma for a long time, they weren't a part of the 1921 events, but when we wanted to talk to people that could help us understand what happened, went to my mother and father's friends, our church members. We pulled together photographs. There was a big outreach to the Black community at large to help us tell the story. And it was anchored in large part by John Hope Franklin, the distinguished historian who grew up in Tulsa and whose father was a lawyer and had encouraged and guided the victims to rebuild Tulsa, Black Tulsa, the Greenwood district. And he was able to give a voice and a context that was very valuable to the documentary.
So it really helped you in your perspective and your ability to get people on camera talking about this, having grown up there with the personal connection through your parents. And just briefly for the audience, Black Wallstreet. Tell us what Black Wallstreet was, because that term kept coming up. What was Black Wallstreet?
Well, it was believed that the Tulsa Black Wallstreet was one of the, if not the most prosperous Black business district in the country. there were grocery stores, there were dry cleaners, there were chili parlors, there were hotels, the whole shooting match, a very thriving community that, because of segregation, we didn't have to go outside for any services. The only thing we had to go outside of our community for was to work. And Tulsa was an oil boom town, so the service industry was very thriving. And many people came to Tulsa to get jobs working as housekeepers and porters and all of that supported a booming oil industry at the time.
So let's talk now about your dad, because you have a new book out called Goin Back to T-Town. And this is about your father, Ernie Fields' experience as a jazz musician in his travels throughout the entire United States, including the Deep South during the 1920s. Tell us about that, Carmen.
Well, let me clarify one thing about the documentary and the title of the book. The documentary was titled Goin Back to T-Town, and that's Goin apostrophe. And that comes from the lyric of my father's very first recording, T-Town Blues, which was recorded in New York City in 1939. And that was part of the track, the musical track of the documentary, featured his music. Okay, fast forward, 25 years or more. And I liked that title for a different reason, because although his travels took him all over the country, and I documented Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, up into Canada, Mississippi, Tennessee, he always returned to T-Town or Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he was married to my mother for 67 years before he passed, educated his family, his children, and so that represents the full circle of him going back to T-Town always. And I just was fascinated by the stories he used to tell, and took an opportunity, particularly during the pandemic. I had started on the book long before the pandemic, and when my father was still alive, getting him to retell the stories, taught him how to use a tape recorder so that when I wasn't visiting, he could, if he had memories that came, he could record them down and I could transcribe them later. But the more research I did, the impact that he had, and his name wasn't a household word, but he was a contemporary of the Cab Callaways and the Duke Ellingtons and Count Basies, who were his friends and colleagues. But I wanted his story to stand on its own as a part of jazz history.
Wow. And so did he stop playing as a young kid there in Tulsa and just got into it? I mean, he found his calling with jazz music?
Well, believe it or not, he was trained at Tuskegee University, which was the Tuskegee Institute, it was called at that time, which was the bastion of trade training for the Black community. That was Booker T. Washington's mainstay. So he had gone to Tuskegee and trained as an electrician, came back to Tulsa. He was raised in a different community, an all-Black community called Taft, Oklahoma. But when he finished Tuskegee, he settled in Tulsa because he had a job on Greenwood Avenue with an electric company. And he was out on a trouble call and heard some young men rehearsing, and he thought that sounded good. He had not been trained as a musician, although he'd been a part of the band while he was at Tuskegee. And he started gigging with these young men, and long story short, since he was a little older and seemed to have a little more training, they asked him to be their leader. And since he was the leader, he named the orchestra after himself. And that's how the Ernie Fields Orchestra was born.
Very smart businessman. The
Indeed.
Ernie Fields Orchestra. I love that.
Yes, indeed. But as you can imagine, traveling with 16 or 17 African-American musicians around the country in a bus could be very dangerous and precarious at best, because there were all these unspoken and spoken rules and regulations, and you never were quite sure when you were going to make a misstep. But thankfully, by the grace of God, he maneuvered quite handily. And his organization, I learned in my research, was a real important training ground for musicians. I have in the back of the book of what I call a roll call, some 100 or more musicians who had come through his organization. Some went into obscurity, others gained fame in their own right. Some started their own musical organizations, but I wanted to give homage to the importance of the so-called territory bands and what they represented for generations of musicians. Those who are students of jazz may recognize the name of Freddie Green, who is the guitarist and a longtime Count Basie mainstay. He had been in the Ernie Fields Orchestra. Leroy Cooper, a baritone saxophone player, was a mainstay with the Ray Charles Orchestra, but he had been in the Ernie Fields organization. Many who were there for years, decades, and some for as short as one day. The great bassist Cecil McBee tells the story of being invited to fill in one day, and he was just out of high school from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he guesses he couldn't cut the mustard because he didn't get invited back to sit in anymore. But those are the characters, known and unknown, who cycle through the Ernie Fields organization.
And obviously, just going to Tuskegee Institute and being formally trained and educated, I assume gave him a huge advantage and an inside track on organizational skills and how to put together an orchestra and how to create more than just himself as a musician. Those are a lot of important skills to have. And that it sounds like that he was able to have influence way beyond his own musical input.
Without a question. But a lot of it was on the job training too, on how to booking and strategies for negotiating contracts. Right. He was greatly influenced by a white country and Western great by the name of Bob Wills, who gave him some tips on booking strategies, whether to ask for a guarantee and a percentage of the gate, as opposed to just a guarantee or just a percentage of the gate. So he learned, he was like a sponge, and learned and applied that to keep his organization working.
Did they perform for white audiences and black audiences, or was it primarily black audiences? How did that work? White and black audiences. And in some instances, they'd go into a particular town and it would be a white dance on Friday night and the black dance Saturday night. And there's one story in the book where the black dance had been one night, and the next night, when the white patrons came, they broke all of the glasses in the bar because they didn't want to drink out of the same glasses that black people had drunk out of. Oh, man. I bet there's some heartbreaking stories in the book. Or are there some heartbreaking stories like that?
There are, and there's great stories of overcoming as well. And I stress my father was not a bitter man. He did not begrudge anyone. He considered himself blessed by his experiences and that he was alive to tell the story. But yes, when you think of it in today's terms, what they had to put up with, not knowing whether they could get something to eat, whether they could use the restroom facilities, it gives you pause for thought.
The name of the book again, Carmen, is Goin Back to T-Town. You got one with you?
I got one.
You want to hold it up? Oh, there you go. Goin Back to T-Town, the Ernie Fields Territory Big Band. That's awesome. That's awesome. Good looking guy there.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm a
When
chip off of a real good block.
Yeah, you are. When you were growing up, did you, like my dad's out there, making music all over the country? I mean, was that pretty cool?
Youth is wasted on the young. I was more than cool. I was more embarrassed that,
Wow.
it's like,
Yeah.
why can't he come home with a briefcase or
Yeah,
at
right.
5 o'clock like other people's dad?
Right. But now, of course, you have immense respect and admiration for what he did.
Without a question.
And that's how most of us are with our parents too, no matter what they do, Later in life, we really tend to appreciate them. So where can people get this book? Is the book out now?
The book is out now. It's available for orders at oupress.com, Amazon, or Barnes & Nobles. And I'm headed back to T-Town for Juneteenth celebrations and some book signings in mid-June.
Well, that's fabulous. Well, you can get the book, as you heard, folks. It's all in the show notes. There are links to where you can get the book. You can order it online, and you can get the documentary if you want to order the documentary from PBS. Mm-hmm. And it was the first documentary about the Tulsa massacre, and it really brought to light a part of our history that nobody really knew about or discussed publicly until Carmen's documentary. So it's a really great contribution you made to the country, to American history, Carmen. So thank you for that. And what a great tribute to your dad to write a book about his trials and tribulations and his victories and all the success that he had, and the way he was able to help other musicians is really fantastic. So folks, you can get the book. It's all in the show notes.
But if they want to know more about Ernie Fields, erniefields.org is a website that was established by one of my dad's fans about 10 years ago. And the Ernie Fields Legacy Book 1 is the Instagram account where you can see all of the information for the last year or so leading up to the book release. So join us at Instagram, Ernie Fields Legacy Book 1.
So, Carmen, you're going to be at the Harvard Bookstore on August 1st. Is that correct?
That's correct. Harvard Bookstore in Cambridge. And I'm excited that my former co-anchor, Christopher Lydon, is going to be the moderator, leading the conversation about my dad and his ups and downs in the jazz industry.
Wow. That is going to be a great interview. Folks, if you can see Carmen and Christopher Lydon live at the Harvard Bookstore on August 1st, I highly recommend it. You will not be disappointed. Carmen has a fantastic story, obviously, about her dad and his experience as a jazz musician back in the 1920s. And Christopher Lydon is a jazz connoisseur. He understands everybody and everything about American jazz. He's a fabulous interviewer, much better than me. And you will thoroughly enjoy that evening. August 1st, Harvard Bookstore, Harvard Square, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Carmen, it's been a pleasure to have you today. I hope to see you on August 1st. If I'm in town, I'd love to stop by and see you and Christopher in action. Well, Carmen, thank you so much for joining us today. Congratulations on the film. And congratulations, of course, on the book. It's been an honor and a pleasure to talk to you again. It's great to catch up, too. Carmen and I go way back. She's been to many of my shows. I've been on her shows when she was a television producer and host here in Boston. So it's great to catch up and great to have you on the Jimmy Tingle Show.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please go to the show notes where you can get the PBS special. You can order Carmen's book, the Ernie Fields, Going Back to T-Town with Ernie Fields and his jazz story. And it's all about America, ladies and gentlemen. Keep the faith, Carmen. Great to see you.